Hi, everybody out in Facebook land. My name is Maria Hansen, and I would like to welcome you to my home today. I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you on dynamic alignment. Basically, it's my thoughts on posture from a kind of a more biomechanic standpoint. Before I get started, though, I wanted to give a big shout out. Thank you to this forum for all of us. It's actually great for me to be able to connect with you guys and kind of still teach and share my thoughts on dancing. For those of you who had an opportunity to see Nazar the other day and Agnes yesterday, I watched both of their lectures and I was just so inspired by both of them. So the way that I'm going to be structuring my class today is I want to give you some thoughts, okay? So much of what I'm going to tell you is what your body already knows how to do. But because of the rules that sometimes get placed on us as we're learning to dance, our bodies kind of start to forget what actually is natural. So when I talk about coming from a more biomechanical place, it's really trying to get you aware of the feelings and sensations within your own body to help you maintain I'm going to structure it in 3 different areas. The first one is going to be just my thoughts on posture in general. What I consider to be optimal alignment in a static position, and then how we use those thoughts as we actually start to move. Okay, so what do I mean by perfect posture? For me, posture is not a position that we are supposed to try to hold. Posture, perfect posture, is actually a balancing act. It's the awareness that we have of the bones within our body, how they're aligned, so that as we shift our balance from foot to foot, that we become aware of being in total balance and able to let all tension release. If we hold tension in our body, intentionally trying to hold a position, we kill movement. Tension kills movement. So my goal today is to kind of give you guys thoughts, some exercises and sensations within your body to start to develop this awareness. So when I am assessing someone's posture, there's 3 things that I'm looking at. The first is what's going on from the hips down, right? We generally tend to call this area our base, and it's comprised of 3 joints. We have the hip joint, the knee joint, and the ankle joint. And we have to be able to access all of those joints when we move, especially the hip joint. The hip joint is our most powerful joint. So we have to be able to access it. And the way that we do that is we have to keep our hips in a neutral position. So basically what a neutral position is, if I show you from the side, right? If you find, you can kind of touch your body. I want you to find the front of the hip bone. Okay, there's an area here where you'll feel. That's called the ASIS. We also can place the thumbs on the top of the backbone. Okay, now in a neutral alignment, and every body is slightly different, so you're just going to have to kind of start to feel the sensations within yourself. But in a neutral alignment, the front of the hip sits slightly lower than the back. Okay, our spine has these curves, and we need to respect those curves. So I'm not trying to straighten out my spine. A straight posture does not mean a straight spine. So we have this lumbar curve, okay, our lower back, and our hips have a very slight sense of a forward tilt to them. Now, in some of these demonstrations that I'm going to do, I'm going to over-exaggerate this a little bit because I want you to be able to see it a little bit more clearly, and I'm not really used to talking to my phone, right? I'm used to actually working with people, so this is a little bit new for me to try to kind of figure out how to get you guys to see this. So I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit, okay? So I want all of you to stay for me, place your hands on your hips, and I want you just to move your hips forward and back, right? There is mobility within our hips. We have mobility forward and back. We can move them side to side, and we can move them around in circles. So there's a lot of range of motion there. Now, right now, I really just want to focus on the forward and back sensation, okay? And what I want you to do is I want you to take your hips and I want you to roll them back. Now, a lot of times when I do this, my students tend to freak out a little bit and feel like their butt is sticking out, but it's really not. sticking your butt out would be to actually take it back. I'm not asking for that. All right, I'm asking you to just feel that you allow the hips to move with a little bit more forward tilt. Now, the reason for this is I want you, as you shift weight from foot to foot, I want you to be able to access the hip joint. If we don't do that, right, so let's try the other way now. So now let's take it forward, right? Like I think sometimes a lot of people have this idea that you have to connect your hips to your partner, right? So then the hips actually change angle. But if you're in this position now, and now you shift your weight from foot to foot, I just want you to feel the difference in your balance and also the amount of pressure that you're putting into your knee, right? So the hips really need to be in a more neutral position so that we can access this very, very important and very, very powerful hip joint. Okay, so I'm talking about static posture right now, static position. So that's the first thing that I want to look at. The second thing is what's happening through the upper body, right? The shoulders and head. How do we position that in a way that is comfortable and natural? There's something that I want to make you aware of. It's called the first rib angle in the body. Now the spine, as I mentioned earlier, the spine has curves. It'll be a little bit difficult for me to demonstrate just on myself, but if you can visualize, in the neck we have a curve, right? It goes this way. Then we have a thoracic curve through our upper back, and then we come through our lumbar back. So our spine is naturally shaped like an S, okay? Now, the first rib angle is an angle that we can measure from the base of the neck. There's 7 vertebrae in the neck. The way to find that is if you were to look down, right? You'll feel back here, and you'll feel some of the bigger bones kind of protruding down. Now, doing this to yourself might be difficult, but if you have someone who is with you at the moment, you can have them place a finger on these vertebrae, and as you lift the head, the way to find the 7th vertebra is that that particular vertebra does not shift in. So it doesn't become part of the neck curve, okay? It's where the curve starts to change into the back. On me, that point is right here. Now I'm going to place my other finger on the sternal notch, right? There's this little hole here, and the collarbones run across the body, and the first rib is located under the collarbone, which is why this is called the first rib angle. So if I place my finger here and my other finger here, and I'm gonna go into bad posture for a minute so I can make this a little bit more obvious. We could draw a line from this finger to this finger, right? So we create an angle, or we see an angle. Now, most people today tend to have a slight forward head posture. Okay, maybe not so much professional dancers because we're been trained to hold ourselves in a slightly different way, but the average American has a forward head posture because we sit so much in our society. So there's been sort of this development of a forward head. Now that generally is caused by too steep of a rib angle. So the muscles in the chest become very tight and they pull everything down. So what we want to try to do, and most of the time this can be fixed just through awareness, okay? The way that I like to kind of visualize this is if you imagine that you have 2 strings attached to your collarbone, I want you to imagine that someone is lifting the collarbone up, okay? Just floating up. I don't really like to try to get people to feel this through any kind of a, compression. Like for instance, I don't really want you to think about trying to push the shoulders down or roll the shoulders back, because again, that creates tension, and tension kills movement. So I actually want there to be a feeling of freedom through the bones in the upper body. So as you have this sensation of allowing the collarbone to float upwards, it changes the position of where your head is aligned over your body. Okay, oftentimes what I have found is that people come into the studio, especially if, and I'm talking about maybe people who aren't necessarily professional dancers, but they come into the studio, and as teachers, we're trying to get them to keep their head up. And so they come in, they have a slightly forward head posture, and then what they do is they lift their chin. So they're not really correcting the problem where the problem is actually lying. Okay, so this is another thing where I'm saying that I want you to be more aware of how the bones in your body are aligned, okay? Now, there is a very strong relationship between what happens through the hips and what happens through the collarbone. So what I want you guys to do for me is I want you to sit in a chair. I'm going to do this sideways to you so that you can see a little bit more. What I'm going to demonstrate here is a concept called counter rotation. Counter is something that we do very naturally in our bodies every day just as we walk. Counter rotation is the ability, it helps the body balance through space as we're moving. So for instance, if I walk, one example of counter rotation is that as my left leg swings forward, my right arm swings forward, okay? So my body has this very, very subtle action within my structure, right? I'm not trying to hold myself and walk. So I don't want to dance this way either, because that's really not how we're designed to move. So in this idea of counter rotation, if I sit at the edge of my chair, so I want all of us to kind of scoot forward, and what I want you to do is most people, when they sit for a long period of time, what happens is we tend to slouch, okay? So what have I done here? I've allowed my hips to rotate under. It's flattened out the curve in my lower back, and it's caused me to be shaped like a cashew, right? So I'm shaped like a big C. Now, if I imagine for a moment that I have a tail coming out of my tailbone. So right now I'm sitting with the tail in between my legs. Now, what I want you to do for me from this position, and just feel what happens to your body, don't force anything. I want you to imagine that you're taking this tail and you're sending the tail behind you. Okay, so what if we've done? We've actually put the natural curvature back in our spine. We've rotated our hips a little bit more forward, which very naturally causes the shoulder girdle to have a sense of lifting. Okay, so let's try that again. So I want you just to feel from here, you're going to allow your hips to rotate under. Okay, so now you can feel the collarbone dropping down, right? You're shaped like this cashew. Now let's say you try to stay in this position, and now you're trying to, say, stretch up into position. There's such a feeling of stiffness and like this lockdown feeling that it's a very, very difficult position to try to attain when the hips are not in the correct place. But now again, if I show you again, I'm going to rotate my hips back, so I'm taking my tail back. It allows my collarbone to lift up in a very, very natural way. Okay, what we're actually looking for when I'm assessing you from the side is what I would like to see. If you imagine a plumb line coming down from my ceiling all the way down at the moment, that plumb line goes through my ear, through my shoulder, through my hip, and down to the floor. Okay, but my spine has curves. I really, really want to make that clear. You cannot take the curves out of the spine to try to maintain posture. And the other thing that I want you to feel, right, if I turn to face you, when you're aligned in the right way, there is not a sensation for me right now that I need to hold myself in this position. I'm not trying to activate all of the muscles in my body to hold myself here. We have movement. We have the ability to shift the bones around to create movement. Okay, our bodies are designed to move. Okay, so that's those two correlations. Those are two areas that I'm looking for as I'm assessing someone's posture. The third area that I look at is what's going on within the core. Okay, the core, basically I'm talking about the abdominal wall. Now for me, the only muscle group that I really tend to focus on in terms of activating on purpose is the core. The core is very important in being able to connect, and it is what connects the upper body to the lower body. So we do have to have a certain amount of tone within the core to be able to stabilize ourselves. Now here I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial. I actually feel that oftentimes when I'm working with people, I find that sometimes they're so focused on using their core that they overactivate their core and again produce a lot of tension and tightness within their body, which again immobilizes you and doesn't allow for free movement. So the core is made up of several different muscle groups, right? We're talking about the abdominal wall. So the muscle that most people are aware of is a muscle called the rectus abdominis, right? It's a muscle in the front. It attaches to the rib cage and comes down to the hips, and the muscle fibers run up and down, and that's the muscle that allows you to bend forward and extend back, okay? It's actually a very important muscle to be able to access through movement, especially say you're doing smooth, right? There's so many actions that allow for that. In ballroom, we may not have quite as much, right? We don't really see people flexing down and extending out, but there is still a sense of breath through that area. So having awareness of that, I think, is really important. We don't want to try to contract all of that. The other muscle group that most people have heard of are called the obliques, and the obliques are the muscles that are on the side. And those muscles, the inner and outer obliques, the muscle fibers run in a diagonal, and those are the muscles that allow us to bend side to side and rotate, okay? Pretty important to be able to access that and release that in order for me to do something as simple as a promenade position, okay? So again, I'm not trying to tighten everything within my core. The muscle that I actually want to bring some attention and awareness to is a muscle called the transverse abdominis. It's a huge muscle. It's the deepest muscle as well. And it's shaped like a big giant belt around the midsection. The muscle fibers run across the body, and it comes around and it attaches to connective tissues to the spine. Now, the problem with that muscle is it gets lazy when we overuse the other ones, right? And so sometimes people have a hard time tapping into that one. The easiest way for me to describe the feeling of this particular muscle group is that, let's say you've got a pair of pants that are tight and you've got to get the zipper up. What we naturally do is we have a sensation of cinching the waist to pick up the zipper, okay? Now, if I show you that action from the side, the thing that I feel is very, very important about this is that what you do through the transverse abdominis should not change the alignment of the spine. And this is where I think there has been a lot of confusion and misunderstanding of how we actually utilize that muscle. We only have to use that muscle just enough to support us. Any overuse and intention of muscle in that way creates too much tension in the body, which again prevents us from being able to move. Okay, so I have different exercises for finding this, because sometimes, like I said, people sort of lose the sensation of this muscle, especially if you're a woman and you gave birth and had a C-section and that muscle has been cut into, that can actually cause a lot of disassociation between the mind and that muscle. So there's certain exercises that you can do to actually target that muscle. So my feeling, and again, this is my feeling could be different than your feeling. The way that I visualize this is that if I imagine my transverse abdominis being an inner core, so I have two cores. I have an inner core and I have an outer core. So the inner core is the one that I feel I'm accessing and holding, but not to the point that I'm giving myself a hernia, okay, just that I have awareness of it. The outer core muscles move around the inner core, okay, so I can have motion from side to side I can have motion rotating around, but if I access all of those muscles, or I try to hold everything, now I just become a big block moving across the floor, and there's really no beauty in that. Okay, it just tends to look stiff. So those are the three areas that I'm looking for. Okay, so we have the base, which needs to remain in a neutral position, especially the hips, so we can access the hips. The upper body, first rib angle, has a sense of lifting, and we have the core. Now, when we, I'm trying to kind of think what direction I want to go with this right now. One of the things that I have found in the past is that when I make people aware of this, okay, and then they put themselves into this ideal alignment, what I oftentimes see is that people will do it piece by piece, right? So they end up taking their hips and they rotate them under, then they take the shoulders and rotate them the other way, and then they try to hold their core. And it looks a little bit funny, right? Because those three areas aren't necessarily energetically connected to one another. So then it just looks like too many pieces together, okay? And it can look a little bit just weird. So one other way that I want you to think about this, right? I used the analogy earlier of the idea of these strings being attached to the collarbone. And so there's a sense of lifting up through the collarbone. So you can sort of feel that your body is hanging from that. That's one way to view posture, to view position. But another way that I have found to be actually quite effective is to become a little bit more aware of the sacrum. Okay, the sacrum is the lower part of the spine where the curve for the hips, you can kind of feel that flip up a little bit, okay? The purpose of the sacrum is to support the weight of the upper body. So it's actually a very, very important part of our body in maintaining this alignment as well. So what I want you to try to feel within yourself is that if I'm standing sideways here, I want you to feel that you're using the sacrum to send energy up to your collarbone. So in a way, in my feeling, what I feel when I do this, is I feel like I'm using that part of my hip to push my collarbone up. Okay, so that's another way to try to sense this alignment. Now, that's all good for a static position, okay? But what happens when we actually want to start to move? So I want to take you through another exercise in feeling this. In biomechanics, there's another term that we call postural sway. Now, postural sway, you'll remember what I said in the very, very beginning of this class. Postural sway, posture is a balancing act, okay? So we're really never trying to just hold ourselves in what we think is a perfect position. Our bodies are in constant flux. The bones are constantly readjusting themselves to help you maintain an upright position. So one way to feel this, and it's very, very, very subtle, okay? So you have to become very quiet and sensitive to yourself and what you're actually feeling inside. So what I want you to do is I'm going to have you just stand with both feet apart. And some of you who meditate may have, if you've ever done a standing meditation, you may have felt this before in yourself. But if you just stand, place your bones into a good alignment, but now just feel that you're allowing your skin and your muscles to hang from there, okay? And I want you to close your eyes. And I want to be quiet for a few seconds because I want you just to pay attention to yourself. But what I want you to feel is as you're standing here with your eyes closed, you're going to start to feel your body and your bones shifting. Just become aware of that. It's not something that you think about. You don't think about your bones readjusting, but your body just knows how to do it. Okay, your body already knows how to move, and your body already knows how to balance. We just have to allow it to do that. So if you hold yourself in place, you're not going to be very successful in your movement. You're not going to be very successful in being able to find balance. Okay, so this is one thing I want you to be aware of. Just right now, we're all kind of sitting at home. I think this is actually a really good time because none of us have a competition to go to for the next couple of months, right? So we have time to maybe become a little bit more aware of our internal body and what we're feeling within ourselves as we move. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples of how this relates to dancing. So let's say right now that I want to shift my balance from one foot to the next, right? So I'm going to start right now with my weight in between my feet. Okay, for my body, my balance is in between my feet. So I'm going to visualize now a vertical axis running through my body. Okay, that's connecting these areas. Now at this point, my hips can be parallel to the floor, and I can maintain my balance very easy and very naturally. Okay, but if we take a look at how our pelvic girdle is structured, we have two legs, right? Our right leg attaches to the right side of our hip, and our left leg attaches to the left side. Now, if I transfer my balance to my right side, which for you guys, if you're copying me, it would be your left. If we keep our hips in this position, right? And I wore black and white today because I wanted to try to make it a little bit more visible what I was doing. So if I transfer my balance to my right side and I keep my hips in the same place, right? So right now I'm just trying to shift my balance. Now, what's happening when I do this? It isn't that I can't do it, but what's happening, if you watch the leg, the bone, if you look at the bones in my legs, just visualize the bone in my right leg, the femur bone is actually being pushed outside of my foot. Okay, so my leg actually, the bones in my legs actually cannot maintain the verticality to the line. But if I shift my body to this side and I allow my hips to quite naturally shift, there's a different sensation that runs through my body. So I actually feel, so if I kind of can imagine, right, this beam of light coming up from the floor, all right? If I shift my weight to this side and my leg and this part of my hip is shifting over, I don't maintain that same feeling of verticality. And eventually what's going to happen is my leg is going to become very tired because I've had to activate the muscles in my leg just to be able to maintain balance. We may not feel it right in the beginning, but the longer you hold it here, the more you're going to start to feel it. But if I allow my hips to change, right? Sometimes we've heard some of our teachers might say that you have a feeling of compressing down into the floor, so you have to use the floor. As you do that, you'll feel the very subtle sensation of the hips shifting, right? If I take my balance to the other foot, same thing. I want to allow the bones in my body to recalibrate to be able to maintain my balance, right? So if I shift to this foot, I'm allowing my hips to change ever so slightly. If you've ever done yoga, I used to have the hardest time with this, just a pose like this, because what I would do is I would shift myself over and now try to lift my leg. But I'm actually creating more of a curve, and I really feel a lot of pressure on the outside of my leg. But if I shift my weight to that side and I allow my hips to shift, now it's quite easy, quite natural, and I sense that feeling that all my yoga teachers used to always talk about in terms of maintaining alignment, okay? But in order to maintain the alignment, the bones have to shift ever so slightly within the body. If I take this to a movement in dancing, okay, and I know I'm going to sound a little bit controversial here, but again, I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, okay, it's more biomechanics rather than just thinking about what we see, what we think we see. So let's say I'm going to do man's part, okay, say I'm doing a pep step, and I want to shift my balance onto my right foot to get ready to do, say, a natural turn. Okay, for me, the most important thing in dancing is maintaining our balance. Maintaining a true balance, not a counterbalance, but a true balance. So if I shift my weight over to this foot, right, so I allow my bones to recalibrate themselves, I can sense this feeling of what a lot of people call a stretch, okay? But in order to be able to stretch, I actually have to let the bone shift. So as I do that, I can maintain that balance and that verticality, even though I create a look of shape. Now, let's say that in my mind, I have the idea that my hips are parallel to the floor and my spine is vertical to that. So as you change the hips, the spine is staying perpendicular to your hips. If I do that, if I actually have that thought process in my head, if I'm moving on to my right foot, and now I'm going to change my hips in this manner, okay, so I've created a sway, but I don't really feel balanced over my foot, right? I feel a bit overbalanced to this side. So as I start to move, I don't really have the freedom of my legs to move underneath me, okay? But if I move across, and now I sense in myself that as I create this sway or shape, I feel like I'm supporting that shape with my base. Now I feel quite easy to move. There's room for my legs to go. Okay, so I know that sounds a little bit controversial, but what I actually would like for you to do during this time is just feel what your body naturally wants to do. Okay, let's say that you're reaching for an object. Okay, I'm short. My kitchen cabinets are really high. And what I have to do is I have to get something out from there. If I just stretch my arm, it's not going to do much for me. Okay, but if I go to reach for that and I allow my bones to shift in such a way that I actually can have a sense of length, then I have a better chance, right? So that's what's happening through everything that I do. That is what allows us to create emotion in our dancing. It allows us to express ourselves. Even as I'm standing here talking to you, I'm moving, right? If I just stood here like this and held myself in place and I'm talking to you, I don't really feel I can communicate very well in that way. Okay, it's the same thing in dancing. I can't communicate if I lock myself in place. So I'm never going to have a sense of locking my posture or locking my frame and holding myself in this position. That might be a good exercise to develop strength and things like that, but in biomechanics, it's not really the way that we're designed to move, right? We have bones, joints, connective tissue, muscle. Everything has a sense of movement, okay? One more thought, okay? Maintaining this, remember I was talking about this sense of the sacrum, using the sacrum and just starting to be a little bit more aware of how these subtle shifts in the bones change how you feel inside. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for you guys. Just something to think about. I wanted to also say that one of the other things is that sometimes if you found any of these movements difficult or you just don't really sense it in your body, sometimes muscle imbalances in our body can help contribute to a loss of feeling in the body. So there are exercises that you can also do to help rebalance yourself. Now I'm going to be doing some videos with Reiki Institute. And so we'll have some videos online. And so if you found any of this interesting and you want to learn a little bit more about it, kind of come at it from a slightly different standpoint, then move on over to BreikiInstitute.com. You'll have the videos up in about a week. The other thing that I want to say is please take care of yourselves during this time. Let us stay connected and take good care of yourself.